takes me back to the time when you were subscribed to me for a week, until you realized that I might want evidence for your so-called patriarchy. Well, now that you've come through, I think I'll unwrap this gift and share it with my viewers. I know you won't mind.
Patriarchy. It exists, it's a real thing, and I'm going to present evidence in this video to demonstrate that.
You do know as a scientist that science has to stand up to logic, right? Well, you failed prior to even making your case with that little question begging.
I was watching a conversation between Steve Shives and King Crocoduck on feminism, and one of the things that came up during the course of the conversation was an assertion that King Crocoduck was not entirely sure that patriarchy existed or was a thing in the world.
That is not an assertion. That is a statement of personal belief.
Because I'm a social scientist, and for me, looking at the evidence, it's very easy to see the overwhelming evidence that patriarchy exists.
Science also requires that your bias is declared and accounted for. Your authority counts for nothing in science. Your evidence is all that matters. Can we get to it already?
And Steve's training is in the humanities, not in the social sciences, and I believe King Crocoduck is studying in the natural sciences.
None of which makes a difference, since a scientific degree is not required to science. Albert Einstein, anyone?
And King Crocoduck does not seem to have training in the social sciences in terms of our approach to investigating the social world.
If KC, receiving an education to become a scientist, doesn't understand the rules of your science, then you're not doing science.
As a feminist and as a published social scientist, and as someone who has actually taught on gender and politics and worked with patriarchal structures in political systems, explain how social scientists define and examine the social structures that are bound up with patriarchy and are reproduced and lead to continuing generations engaging in the same patriarchal power structures.
Well, at least you have finally declared your bias. Now, are you taking that bias into account and adjusting your result accordingly?
I'm going to discuss the social construction of reality and give you an example.
Reality is not a social construct. I dare say if society as a whole decides tables are not solid, they would continue to be solid.
Then we're going to define patriarchy in terms of its definitions, and also egalitarianism, so that we can contrast the ways that the world could be structured.
And I'm sure definitions will be currently socially accurate because of the scientific nature of your presentation, right?
And then we're going to look at quantitative evidence that allows us to conclude that patriarchy is a real thing that exists.
You state you're going to present hypotheses, and then without even the slightest blush of embarrassment, and in the same breath, without even presenting these hypotheses, you confirm your bias. How sciencey.
And qualitative evidence that also triangulates to the fact that patriarchy exists and people experience it in their daily lives.
And keeps going.
And then in the end, I'll kind of wrap it up with the conclusion that the patriarchy is a real thing.
And going.
Is establish my credentials as to why I know what I'm talking about. One is my academic qualifications and my teaching qualifications. This is my PhD. So I've been dealing with issues about the social world and topics related to politics and gender for quite a while now. I've also taught. Here's a list of my relevant publications.
Over a minute of self-aggrandizement. Forgive me for pointing out that your actual or perceived authority to speak on a topic does not automatically infer your correct analysis of the topic. Peer review, repeatable research, testable hypotheses. They're a thing.
Are social entities objective entities that have an external reality to social actors? Or are social constructions built up from the perceptions and actions of social actors?
1. Social entities can be objective entities with an external reality, i.e., governing documents. 2. Social entities can be subjective constructs of perception, i.e., language. This is another false dichotomy.
And here I'm going to quote from Blakey. In other words, ontological statements are claims and assumptions that are made about the nature of social reality, claims about what exists, what it looks like, what units make it up, and how these units interact with each other.
So in effect, you're saying that claims and assumptions are an appropriate tool for your further claims and assumptions. Never mind the possibility that there may be objective measures by which subjective social interaction may be defined. We need go no further than subjective explanation.
How does the social world exist? It doesn't exist like the material world. You can't point to democracy and say, that thing over there, that's democracy. You have to describe a system of a series of statements of factors that would agree with a definition of democracy. So it's not like measuring the external world.
So if I showed you a document proving a government a democracy, showed you video footage of everyone voting, and accounted for every citizen in the voting results, I have still not proven a democracy because I have only evidenced the physical reality of it? What an incredible word salad of falsehood you toss. Unfortunately for you, I became a 5-star word salad chef just so I could defeat arguments like this. And just so you know, a democracy is where all members have equal and direct participation. And I didn't need to break it down to the atomic level to know that.
And there are 2 ways that you can examine the social world, and you don't have to choose between them. I think there are some phenomena we can get at quantitatively, and some phenomena we can get at qualitatively. And we need to triangulate, experiment, qualitative and quantitative research.
Well, to start, you can't triangulate quantitative and qualitative, so of course you outed your own false dichotomy by adding experiment.
In terms of how the social world exists, one position is objectivism, and objectivism holds that reality exists independent of our knowledge of it, that social phenomena and their meanings have existence independent of individuals or social actors.
Yes, Kristi, objectivists have no understanding that the topic of reality, in general, could also include specific subjectively driven parts that construct subjective societies. We believe every nation has existed nigh on eternally, even before we knew they did. I know you can't hear it, so that was sarcasm.
On the other hand, constructivism holds that the world does not exist independent of our knowledge of it. Reality is constructed by human actors.
Yes, those people are called solipsists, i.e., they believe they are the only reality.
There are no central values that can be rationally and universally grounded.
Like gravity, light, space-time, etc. Again, you're talking about solipsists.
And the researcher, therefore, is always presenting a specific version of social reality, rather than one that can be regarded as definitive.
But not you. You're presenting a social reality that requires you not to understand the difference between objective and subjective, or that you will be a solipsist. I'm also waiting for you to find some precision in your terms, and to stop conflating all of reality with this social reality.
If this all sounds very new and strange, I think there's something I can do to help you understand how we construct our reality, how there's a social construction of our reality that we all engage in. Hold on.
While you go to get your evidence, allow me to explain. As a member of a class of humans who do not make social constructs of any kind, this isn't new or strange. I hear these arguments all the time. A social construct is not the sum total of reality. Social constructs are subjective interpretations of how to deal with objective reality.
This is a 50-euro note. Why is 50 euros worth 50 euros? Is there some force in the world that determines this objective standard of money? No. It's only worth 50 euros because we say it is.
It is a piece of paper that is only subjectively a 50-euro note. Reality. It is a piece of paper that is objectively backed by a central bank who subjectively determined it to be a 50-euro note. I do know sciencing is hard, but please do try.
That's it. Or we trust that people who determine how much money is worth say it is. And we go, okay, well, that's how much it's worth, so let's do this exchange. That's how we socially construct reality.
Would everybody who did realize that objectively she is holding a piece of paper that has been given a subjective value, and that objective reality has remained largely unaffected by this social construct, please raise your hands? Not you, Kristi. Put your hand down.
It's just paper, but our perception of it is what drives social reality.
You seriously need to stop conflating reality with social reality. It won't be excused when you explain, it's just a term to use so I can science. Because the conflation is so blatant, I need not point it out in the first place.
This is best summed up by an Onion headline that I saw from a few years ago.
Really? You're going to seriously use the Onion as evidence?
We see the scientific method being applied to the social world, and a lot of useful information can come from applying a more experimental, deductive approach to the social world. And I'm very much in favor of survey data and experimental data. But we can't treat human beings like atoms.
In other words, while the scientific method is all well and good for every other natural phenomena, people have fifis that can't be understood deductively. We need to introduce some listen and believe.
We have context, we have meanings, we have feelings, we have histories, and to ignore the context, the linguistic, the cultural, the emotional aspects of human behavior because we can't easily measure it or point to it or weigh it or use it in inferential statistics doesn't mean we should throw out that data.
Yes, as I just explained.
When we take up a positivist position to analyze the social world, we're coming at it from an approach which states that an empirical theory attempts to describe and or explain a social phenomenon or phenomena using a series of interconnected abstract statements consisting of assumptions, definitions, and empirically testable statements.
An empirical theory that uses anecdotes, assumptions, definitions, and testable anecdotes.
In a qualitative approach to social research, the view is that social phenomena and their meaning are being continuously created and accomplished by social actors. And the researcher is trying to present a specific version of social reality and understanding or trying to understand how others react and understand that particular social phenomenon.
Present a specific version of social reality. Please do tell me why I should not read that to say, find what you are biased to find and then present it as reality.
Now that I have what we think is a more accurate and fuller and richer understanding of the approaches that social researchers use to understand the world that we live in, I want to go ahead and provide some information on patriarchy, because we're going to move now into our patriarchy section of the video.
After 10 minutes of excuses and explanations, we are finally getting to evidence. Excellent! But now I must take some interviews to find out the constructionist reasons my videos can only be 15 minutes long. Continued in part 2.